Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to be recording this session. There have been some requests for the recording. Originally, we weren't going to post the recording, but I think with the demand or the interest, we might be posting this session. So I don't want to delay any further. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Eva Garcia. I'm a Planner 3. I'm the Bike Ped Program Coordinator for the RGVMPO, but I can't do any of this without our team, and the main person for this effort is Melanie Rodriguez, who will introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melanie. I am a planner and a GIS specialist for the RGVMPO. If there are any technical assistance, feel free to reach out to me via email. The deadline to request any technical assistance regarding this program call is on April 26th at 5 p.m. Thank you.
And we'll go over some of those details. But thank you, Melanie, for introducing yourself. Again, I do recommend for those of you who have questions or submitting things, including both Melanie and myself, will help ensure that us on our team stay on the same page, and that if we need to get back to any of you for any reason, information-wise, that we're doing that together and one of us will reach back out. So I want to go over today's agenda. There's some minor changes from last week. They're really minor. I want to go over some questions that were asked last week and some of the answers that we have as a response to those questions that we had. Then we'll go over really the RGVMPO's call for projects as an overview, highlighting the funding summary, the schedule of activities, the program guide, scoring criteria, the application itself, a breakdown of it with best practices for detailed applications. And then just so that there's more information on what applying for TA funds really means, we're going to go over some of the local government project procedures, highlighting specifically qualified persons, what that means, the text.lgpp, which is local government project procedures overview. There's a video on that. We won't play, but I wanted to show you all that it exists. And then we'll go over some of the training courses they have available, some development and delivery resources, and then last but not least, how to submit that technical assistance request. We are going to accept some emails, but I'll go over another form. So last week, one of the questions we got during our first workshop was if our organization submitted a preliminary application to the TxDOT, which is the statewide Transportation Alternatives Call for Projects, aka they applied for statewide TA funds, is our organization eligible to apply for the local MPO TA? And the answer is yes, your organization can submit to both. And let me explain. As long as the project, the same or substantially similar project cannot be considered to both call for projects concurrently. But if that project was not selected or has been withdrawn for any reason, then it can be submitted to the MPO's call. And organizations, entities, agencies, they can submit project proposals or applications to both the statewide and the MPO call, but for different projects. So as long as your projects are substantially different, then you're eligible to apply to both funding opportunities. And they are different, right? Ours is a portion, and I'll go over that. But if a project, the next question, if a project was not eligible for the state call, does that mean it would be ineligible for the MPO call? And not necessarily is the easiest answer I can give. For example, the statewide call has 4 different categories of funding, I believe. And one of those specifically is the community-based project category. And so if communities are in a TMA, which the MPO is a TMA, it's based on population, then they are not eligible to submit projects for this category to the state. But those projects would or should be eligible for funds through the MPO. And so that's just one example, but you can request technical assistance if you have any questions on eligibility of any kind. How many applications or project proposals can one entity submit was our last question. And there's currently no limit to the number of project proposals or applications that an eligible project sponsor can submit. And I did link page 20 here for FHWA's guidance to listing what are eligible entities. So again, recap, you can submit more than one application. They should be different projects. And as long as what you're submitting to the MPO is different than what you submitted to the state, you can submit to both funding opportunities. And feel free to raise your hand, use the chat, or just unmute yourselves if you have any questions or want to slow me down for any reason. I'm going to go over a lot of material, and I'm going to try to be as clear as I can, but let me know when to pause and stop. It's really not a problem. And if anything, I encourage it so that I can make sure to give you the information that you need. So I wanted to go over a quick 101. For those of you that don't know, the Transportation Alternative Set-Aside, as it's known now, what we call in Texas Category 9, it's the single largest investment in trails, walking, and biking, but is the smallest line item in transportation spending. And so TASA funding is suballocated to areas based on the relative share of the state's total population. And so for areas like the RGV and the RGVMPO specifically, urbanized areas with populations of more than 200,000 do receive their own apportionment of funds. And I'll go over that here in a second. But overall, the federal requirement is that these funds must be distributed through a competitive process, which is why we have the call for projects and why we develop scoring criteria and an evaluation method here regionally. But no more than 80% of eligible project costs can be reimbursed by the federal government. That's by federal law. And additionally, the MPO for our areas are responsible for that project selection and administration in conjunction with the state DOT. So you're going to hear a lot about the MPO and about TxDOT, and that's because we are working in conjunction with them. And that's just per the federal requirements, but it also creates consistency throughout the state. So again, federal funding overall, it's a multi-step process, and TASA, like many other programs, is a reimbursement program. And so FHWA will compensate states for project costs as they are incurred. And so apportionment, again, happens at the federal level, and these FHWA, Federal Highway Administration, apportions funds to each state as determined by that federal legislation. Programming is where we currently are using the competitive process. DOTs and MPOs select projects to receive funding. That's why the state has their call for projects, and that's why we're having our call for projects. But obligation of funds is another critical part of this multi-step process. And this, I put a little star there, is primarily the project sponsor's responsibility. So the federal government takes funding to the state gives that money to the MPOs, both the state and the MPOs do their competitive process and program dollars to your projects. And then your project, if selected, is responsible for obligating those funds. And then eventually through the development, submitting requests for reimbursement to Federal Highway Administration through the state for that funding. So just FYI, it's a multi-step process. They all work hand in hand, and we work hand in hand with all of our agencies that oversee this. And just to really give a little bit more details, specifically TASA funding is it lapses after 3 to 4 years. Originally, everyone said 3 years, but when you include the fiscal year that it's programmed, it's about 4 years. And so what does lapsing means? It means that funds can disappear as though they've never existed. Once you've expired, those funds expire. That's kind of what happens. If you do not obligate your funds by that 3 to 4 year window, then those funds lapse. Once the funds are obligated, though, there's no other problem. Reimbursement shouldn't be an issue. Any questions on that? I think we'll be okay and we keep moving. But overall, for our TASA funding summary, we have a total of about $9 million that we would like to program. And of that, a minimum of 10% will be for planning projects, while a maximum of 90% will be for construction. And so I just really want to highlight that minimum 10% still totals 900,000, which is more funding than we've ever had. But I really want to encourage individuals or agencies to submit for these planning dollars. If you've been following the project readiness discussions at the technical advisory committee and the policy board, really what the state and what everyone is looking for is for shovel ready projects. So when you apply for planning funds, you can use that money to either do a feasibility study, to get environmental clearance, or to develop plans themselves. And so once you're able to kind of get through those phases, then you're determined as a shovel ready project, ready for construction and ready to obligate more funding. And so I really want to highlight that planning funding amount, but overall, with construction, we have about 8 million to program, and I'm looking forward to see what kind of applications we receive this year. Just to compare to other previous fiscal years or call for projects, back when it was Harlingen Brownsville MPO and Hidalgo County MPO, together those two MPOs had an apportionment of about $4.5 million that they programmed, excuse me. And then the next year, the first call for projects the RGVMPO did was for nearly 2.3 million. So 4 fiscal years worth of apportioned funds only totaled 6.8 million. And you can see now that we have a significant increase for these 2 years of programming. And I think in the future, we're going to continue seeing this type of funding available, at least for the next program call. But we'll see for how many years into the future. So just FYI.
So we're ready.
Okay. Just to go over the schedule of activities for everyone. March 1st was the day that we opened the call for projects. We had our first workshop March 15th, and that's complete. This is our second virtual workshop today. So thank you all for joining. We're going to be posting these questions and answers, like I showed you in a slide before, to our website no later than March 31st, but I think we'll be able to do it before then. The deadline to request technical assistance, as Melanie stated, is April 26th, and we'll go over some reasons why you may want to start that coordination and make those requests. But overall, the absolute deadline to submit a project proposal or an application is May 31st by 5 p.m. It's all going to be virtually submitted by email. And so nothing in paper, in person, or needing to be time stamped. But if you can get those emails in by 5 p.m., then your application will be received. In June, the RGVMPO will work with TxDOT staff to do an application review, and we may be seeking clarification at this point. I'll go over that into some greater detail. And in July, we're hoping to kind of get those applications that have been reviewed over to our Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee voting members so that they can begin their review of applications. And all those eligible applicants will be asked to come to the regular BPAC meeting in August to do 10-minute presentations on their project and answer any questions that our voting members have. This meeting will just be for presentations, Q&A, because it will host a special meeting for voting members only to do the actual evaluation and project scoring, and we'll take action at that special meeting. And then we'll take that action and recommendation of projects to the Technical Advisory Committee on September 14th. These are tentative dates, so long as those meeting dates don't change, and the Transportation Policy Board in September as well. And once it goes to the Policy Board, that will come along with a resolution, and that'll officially program the funding, and the MPO will work internally to make sure those programmed funds enter our Transportation Improvement Program or plan, and our Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Transportation Improvement Program. So we got to get those projects, once awarded, once we have the resolution from the policy board, into our documents so that the state can recognize them and approve them and get agreements going. Anything else to add? Okay, we're doing good. So this is another way to look at that schedule of activities. Obviously the TASA application, right? It's due May 31st. The review, specifically what we're going to look at is project eligibility. This will be where the location of your project is, what the scope of work is, and whether or not you as a project sponsor are eligible to receive these funds. We don't anticipate any problems, and overall, I think it'll be easy to green light a lot of this. But the other part that we're going to do in working with our state is ensuring that the cost estimates look accurate or close to what they should be. We're going to be looking at agreements, if applicable or necessary, maps and property ownership. I think something that we've seen with other projects is when there isn't an early assessment or guidance provided, then there tend to be project delays. And so anything that we're asking for, supportive materials, like more than likely isn't going to affect any project scoring or evaluation criteria. The only reason we really want some of this additional information is to ensure that we're coordinating early and providing guidance early so that we don't risk the lapsing of funds at the state level. And so once again, I don't anticipate too much trouble. We'll go over the application and you can see what I mean by supportive material. But if for any reason, we'll use June and July to kind of go back and forth. And then again, we'll officially award in the fall. And I anticipate this will be before the new fiscal year. And yeah, you can kind of see the details of there would happen. So this is again the same thing. You see how long you all have. We're kind of mid-March right now, or a little bit on the later end. You still have, 2 full months to work on applications. I don't think they're too difficult, but you can give me honest feedback. I'll accept it. And then we'll have 2 months for review and then 2 months for official programming. Any questions on that? I think that covers our schedule of activities section. Not seeing anything in the chat or any raised hands. I'll continue to proceed. Melanie and but Melanie, thank you. We utilize the Texas Department of Transportation's TA program guide. They have an extensive guide. We used a lot of that, tailored it for our region, got rid of some things that weren't applicable and put in some other things that were applicable. But overall, there's about, this is your table of contents, and Melanie did, linked each section. So if you wanted to jump to that in the program guide, there's more details in that. And I just wanted to kind of highlight that all of these will be linked, and you should have access to the PowerPoint from last week, but just FYI, these will all be here for you. I'm not going to go over each section, but I am going to take some time to cover a few of these sections right here. So the first one I want to cover is the eligibility of project sponsors. Any local government, regional transportation authority, any transit agency, public land agency, school district, nonprofit, they're all eligible to apply for funding through this call for projects. And eligible activities for construction include sidewalk improvements, bicycle infrastructure improvements, trails, shared use paths, ADA upgrades, high visibility crosswalk installations, curb extensions, bulb outs, refuge islands, infrastructure related projects to improve safety. And safety is going to be huge. We'll go over the scoring criteria, but safety, safety, safety. For planning projects, you can fund feasibility studies, environmental assessments, surveying, and schematics, which is often needed, detailed design plans or ADA transition plans. And again, we do hope to see more planning projects as well. In the program guide, you'll also have more details on other requirements. And so there's a 20% minimum local match required. Additionally, we are asking everyone to include about 15% of your total project cost as a TxDOT administrative fee. And this is just a round estimate. The actual cost for TxDOT administrative fee or for their oversight is going to come through the advanced funding agreement. This just helps you budget for what you might need. And hopefully it's an over budget and not an under budget. But if you work with us, we can help kind of guide you through that and understanding sort of better what those costs might be. But in continuing with this, I put a lot of information up here. I just wanted to highlight that other federal programs can be used as local funding match when specifically authorized by federal law or regulation. So if you have questions about that, get with Melanie and I. We can start inquiring to see if maybe one of your federal programs is eligible or can be authorized to be used as match. Other than that, the TxDOT can sometimes apply state funds as local match. One of the programs that they utilize is the Economically Disadvantaged Counties program, but at the time of application and the time of submittal, you cannot incorporate any of that. If your project is selected through the development of an AFA, the TxDOT FAR district office will reach out to you if they're able to if they've decided or able to use some of their state funds for your project and local match. And again, this is a reimbursement program. After a project is authorized to proceed, and that happens through an FPAA and an SLOA, we'll go over that in more detail. After that authorization, then allowable expenses are incurred by the project sponsor and reimbursement must be requested from the department. If a project selected to, I'm sorry, if a project selected, the project sponsor must provide the local funding match prior to commencement of project activities. So for example, you get your advanced funding agreement, you fully execute it. That advanced funding agreement will let the project sponsor know how much money they should send in a check through with the execution of the agreement, and then how much money may need to be sent 60 days prior to construction, right? And that's for construction projects. For planning projects, you just send one check and then you're able to proceed and the rest is reimbursable, right? So again, project evaluation and selection criteria, we have an application deadline. We're going to review it. We're going to request supplemental information to do a project screening. Your eligible project sponsors will be notified of eligibility and asked to prepare a 10-minute presentation for BPAC. And here's the meeting date and time. If needed, depending on how many applicants we receive, we'll extend the meeting and we may offer lunch, but we'll know more after May 31st of how much time we're going to need and when we'll be programming these presentations. Other than that, like I said, recommendations are going to be taken in September. Any questions before I proceed with project evaluation and selection criteria? Awesome. I think we're making good time. So scoring criteria is part of the competitive process and the development of it. It helps ensure that all projects are evaluated and weighted equally by the voting membership of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. But as applicants, you should know what you're going to be scored on. And so we're going to go into that in greater detail. And here on this slide, I just kind of summarized in one sentence what I think each category is defined by. So project readiness should demonstrate the ability to advance the project to construction, right? And this helps ensure the obligation of funds. Safety benefits, this demonstrates the need for safety improvements and appropriate safety countermeasures. And we'll dive into that a little bit more too. Equity, you get points for equity if it can enhance the livability by improving active transportation access in underserved communities. Connectivity improves mode choice to destinations of interest and eliminates barriers to vulnerable road users. And so allowable costs, again, any planning activities associated with the development of planning documents, preliminary engineering and design, preparation for construction plans, specifications and estimates, environmental documentation, and project construction. And I bring up the funding summary again, because again, we want to see all of these funds programmed. Your application is what your application is, but with all of the state and federal requirements, I really recommend, I have a saying, is like the juice isn't worth the squeeze if it's like a $200,000 project. When you have a bigger project, 800,000, $1 million, I feel like the juice is more worth the squeeze because you're going to be doing a lot of federal state requirements, a lot of documentation, especially for reimbursement. And I think it's a good thing. It's a checks and balances system, but just something to consider, right? If you're not doing a planning project and you're doing a construction project, you're good. What you're asking for is that juice worth the squeeze. And so the non-eligible costs are environmental mitigation, utility adjustments, landscape improvements, and the acquisition of right-of-way. These are not approved by TxDOT for TA funds. Bikeway terminology is another section in the program guide, and we kept this there from what the state has because we want consistency with our state partners. When we say, shared use path or a side path, we mean multi-use, bi-directional, generally speaking, 8 feet in width or more, separated and raised bicycle lanes, very clearly should be separated by a physical barrier. While bike lanes or buffered bike lanes are really only designated by paint and not by a physical barrier. A bicycle accessible shoulder, which is applicable for a lot of rural areas, but we wouldn't want to encourage that in urban areas, might look something like this, and it's on a high-speed road and it's minimal like markings on pavement. But a shared lane is when there isn't a separated space with paint or a physical barrier. Really, it's just the encouragement of usually for like slower 35 mile per hour or less. Actually, I prefer 30 miles per hour or less with low volumes of traffic. This is what you might consider for a shared lane. And TxDOT does allow these as projects, but I kind of like, I'm thinking more if you're trying to connect a whole city and there's an area where you have tighter constraint, then maybe you just recommend a shared lane for a block or two until you can create a more designated and safer space as well. But just as a concept, there's more terminology in there. I was going through the additional web links and highlighting some specific areas before we started this workshop, but the program guide has a full page or two dedicated to web links and resources. The MPOs specifically utilize our inventory map, our active transportation inventory map, utilize our active transportation plan. There's a lot of good recommendations in here. I believe there's even like an exhibit on cost estimates. And so just to kind of show you, this is our active transportation map. You can see some of the layers that are here. If you want to turn on sidewalks or proposed routes or see what's in our metropolitan area boundary, that's there. There's some disadvantaged census tract information here. You can have quick access to our active transportation plan. So I recommend utilizing this, looking in your area, trying to like highlight specific routes, or even if you want to incorporate some of your maps and connections using our map, that'd be great. Going back here, I wanted to show there are some design guidelines in this appendix. If I'm not mistaken, we have some cost estimates. But overall, I just recommend checking out these web links, oh, here we go. Checking out some of these documents, especially the ones that are specific to our region. Other than that, TxDOT has a bunch, environmental handbook, the project management guide I highlight again later. We have bike ped counts, a tourism, like an example network, the roadway design manual for what can really be approved, bicycle accommodation design guidance. You might want to check that out for what you're proposing to develop or build, especially if it's on system roads. If it's off system, you still probably want to look through it, but if it is on system road, you definitely want to look through that. The proven safety countermeasures, again, some of your points for scoring is going to come from safety, and so give a review of these countermeasures, and maybe there's some that you can incorporate or that you're already incorporating, but there's just more guidance there. So fast forward, yeah, there's the census info, a lot of other resources. I think take a look at your ADA stuff, accessibility. That's going to be important for equity as well. Another section of the program guide has definitions and terminology, and I just wanted to highlight some of the alphabet soups that we use here at the MPO on a regular basis, especially when it comes to funding management and project management. AFA, Advanced Funding Agreement. You need every single project that gets funding from the MPO has to sign an advanced funding agreement with the state for their project and for that funding. And reimbursement or funding from the federal government will not come in without that AFA. BPAC, that's the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. You're going to hear that a lot, especially for TA funding. The EDCP is the Economically Disadvantaged Counties Program. Federal Highway Administration. Federal Participation Authorization Agreement is that FPAA. That is how funds are obligated. And that usually comes with the SLOA, the State Letter of Authority. And so this is later in project development, especially for construction projects, but critical acronyms to know. But PS&D is Plans, Specifications, and Estimates. TxDOT is the Texas Department of Transportation. TAC, Technical Advisory Committee. Transportation Policy Board. Our TIP, or Transportation Improvement Program. And a TMA is a Transportation Management Area. So with all that, that's what's in our program guide, and there's more details into the scoring criteria, but let me dive deeper into this. There's a whole document that you can check out on our website that's just about this scoring criteria. So we'll look into that. I think we'll change that link. But overall, the biggest difference here is that project readiness and safety benefits are being weighed the same at 25% or a maximum of 25 points. Equity will be 20% and connectivity is 30% for a total of 100 maximum points that each project can score. And this is what our scoring criteria looks like for both construction and planning projects. And you can see here the evaluation method and the evaluation details with the description factor per criteria. And we'll dive into this now. Project readiness, again, the ability to advance projects to construction. We're going to be looking at your PS&D, which includes those cost estimates, any environmental documentation you may have readily available, right of way, if that exists, who owns it, if it's another, if like, let's say the city of Brownsville is applying for funding and they want to use right of way that is publicly available, but it belongs to Cameron County Drainage District or the Brownsville Independent School District, you have the right of way. Technically it's public right of way, but we want to see an agreement, or we want to see the initiation of an agreement with those public land managers if you may need it. The other thing we're going to look at is railroad impacts and utility coordination. And so this, again, will kind of affect your score overall, your project score and your ranking, depending on how much you have available. The BPAC voting membership will determine how many points they want to give in each of these areas, and it will be based off your application response or your presentation in that Q&A. Safety benefits, right? We want to see the need that's there in the area that you're proposing a project for, and whether or not what you're proposing in your scope of work provides safer or less intimidating accommodations. And so the MPO, and I'll go through this in the application, will do an analysis of your crash count or rate. You'll let us know what safety countermeasures you might include in your project or proposed infrastructure elements that you might propose. And we'll go over that deeper under application. For equity, this is, provides health and environmental benefits by incorporating landscaping, sidewalk design, crossing treatments, street furniture, bike racks. And then the new BIL does require that our competitive process prioritize project location and impact in high need areas as defined by the state, such as low income, transit dependent, rural, and other areas. And because of these BIL requirements, and because we want to ensure consistency across all projects, the MPO will be doing that analysis and determining for each of the applicants based on their project information what the average percent of elderly, disabled, zero-car household, people living below the poverty line is, what those averages or percentages are, and then how much of it is within a historically disadvantaged tract. For connectivity, this is your biggest category. 30 points can be, garnered here. It should improve access to destinations of interest, support multimodal connections, eliminate barriers for people, including wheelchair users, but also support investments for tourism. I think overall, right, this is going to be based on your application response. And I think the supplemental materials is going to be a huge help in demonstrating the project's ability to improve connectivity, excuse me. And so when I was thinking about this, we're talking about here about, business districts, downtown, employment centers, etc. I do recommend using a map and maybe color coding public parks with, employment centers, and color code schools and hospitals, et cetera, et cetera. But that way, through one map, we can kind of see what is being connected, what type of amenities or destinations are being connected. Any questions on the scoring criteria? I am like burning through this. We're doing good. Any questions at all? Okay, not hearing any. I'm gonna continue. Okay. So we have a 3-part application. There's part A, part B, and part C, and this is different than we've done it before. Part A is your typical project information and project application. The first page is going to be what your proposal is, what you want to do, what you want to request funding for, and then pages 2 and 3 are going to be evaluation questions that are related to the scoring criteria, which is what we just went over. So anything that says like based on the applicant response, that's pages 2 and 3. Part B will be a project information form, and it has a budget there, and I'm going to go into that in detail. And then part C will be this, it's a SPA form. It's pages 5 through 8, and we'll go over it. But the reasons why we included B and C was to help facilitate what is needed to develop an AFA, an advanced funding agreement. So once you get programmed, many of you have probably been through this process before, but when TxDOT reaches out to you, one of the first things they do is they ask you to fill out a project information form. They ask you to fill out a PIF. And this is basically like your first draft, your first stab at filling out a PIF. It's not going to be the official one for your AFA, but it is going to get you to understand what is going to be asked of you from the state. And we can work through the budget. I'll get to that. But the same thing with the SPA. The SPA basically demonstrates your experience for project management as a project sponsor, and is the next step after you submit the PIF. TxDOT asks you to submit a SPA, and then they send you the draft AFA. So by incorporating Part B and Part C into the application process, we're hoping to give you an edge, not only in what you're going to have to submit, but in what, in just that practice, I think, of what, in a review period. So you'll be able to get feedback before you actually submit it. Any questions? Let me get some water. I need a minute. Hold on. Okay, great. Thank you. So project part A of the application is, again, your basic project information. Here under the project sponsor, you're going to put the name of your organization. You're going to put the date that you submit it. That's, whatever, it should match whatever is in our email for me. Your point of contact person and their title should be someone who has the authority to commit local match, right? So that 20%, whoever's your point of contact, that title should contribute local match. I want a phone number for a direct line. I know a lot of cities have hotlines. Okay, but let us help you get funding for your project by giving us a direct line to work with you on. I hope you understand that. I mean it in the kind way. I normally don't mind, but if you want money from us, I recommend you give us a direct line. And additionally, for your email address, it doesn't have to be the same person, but we want someone that we can email and talk to for grant coordination. So any supplemental materials, any clarification of the project, this should be someone who speaks, who understands what the project is and can speak to it. Someone who has the time to go back and forth with us, but maybe doesn't have the authority to commit that local match, right? So I hope that's clear. So you're going to put in your funding request, and this should be the federal amount only, and then your local match, and it should have 20% and include direct state costs in your budget. Your project name should be simple yet descriptive. I prefer short and sweet, because we're gonna have to do a lot of future coordination. I put this in a lot of documents, but you can also keep it long, that's fine. Acronyms can be used as well for longer names, and it will help. But you can also explain that in the narrative if you'd like. So for your project description, it should be what your scope of work is, and you can attach supplemental materials like site maps, drawings, and photographs. And there's a tutorial link if you want to create or share a Google map. I recommend you clearly and simply state what the funds will be used for. The scope of work described here will be used for the development of an AFA. It shouldn't be too much, right? Be careful with what you're committing to deliver on. That's my biggest recommendation, because flourishing can really hurt. If you say, oh, we're gonna build a 14-foot sidewalk, your agreement is gonna say a 14-foot sidewalk. And then you're gonna come back, maybe oh, we don't have 14 feet, we only have 10 feet available. Well, why did you put 14 feet? Right? Like, don't flourish it. We need something that you can deliver on. If your parking lots to a trail, or, lighting, whatever it is, don't incorporate like, oh, we're going to have water fountains and this and that. And then you're not going to be able to afford that or fund all of that. Just what can you deliver on? And then please attach a narrative if you want to include more information on the background, like here in this space, scope of work. But if you want to add background, benefits, label that attachment as project description or whatever, and send it in. We do want to know if this is, one phase of an overall vision, or if this connection was, wanted or requested by this elementary school, X, Y, and Z. Like if there's a history there, or if there are benefits to what the project is going to deliver on, feel free to send that to us as supplemental or as an attachment with your other site maps, drawings, and photographs. So your project length, ideally it's in miles. You could also use linear feet. Your limits from and to should be street names or coordinates. And these will go into our Metropolitan Transportation Plan or our Transportation Improvement Program. So because these go into the documents, be careful with your limits. Again, this goes back to what you can deliver on. For eligible project sponsor, it's a drop-down button, and you just click which one is applicable to you. For project type, you can check all that apply. Maybe a portion of this is a multi-use path, and then you're also going to incorporate, some, I don't know, bike parking. You're going to have, new construction, etc. Just check all that apply there. These options came through eligibility in the federal requirements documents, just as an FYI. But when we go into part A, pages 2 to 3, these are your evaluation questions, and they're all labeled by that scoring criteria category. And so we do recommend attach backup documentation, and label that first page, exhibit A or B, C, whatever, project readiness. And so if documentation is not provided at the time of submittal, it will likely be requested during review, but prior to scoring, just to be able to verify the eligibility of points that the project will receive. All of these 4 options here, 3, 4, 5, and 6, give you a drop-down button to select 0%, 30%, 60, 90, or 100. And you're basically letting us know we have 30% of our plans, specifications, and estimates, 0% of our environmental clearance, 100% of our right-of-way, and 0% of utility status. And so, again, documentation to back up your response should be attached as an exhibit. During the review period, all of these exhibits will be reviewed to validate your response, and questions or clarification will be needed prior to the scoring and evaluation. So if you say 100% environmental clearance and you submit no backup, when the review period comes, me and Melanie are gonna send an email, oh, thank you for your application. These are the questions that we have. For A4 in your application, you say you have 100% environmental clearance. Please submit the environmental documentation or that records or demonstrates your clearance on this. And just stuff like that. Like, we're going to be validating what you're responding. We're not going to take it as face value, and that's not against you. That is just us doing our jobs, so that we can ensure we're giving the best, most accurate information to our voting members, and making recommendations with the most readily available accurate information. So the next section, B, is on safety. And you can see here, B7, no response is required from the applicant. This is something that we're going to incorporate as a part of the evaluation method, but staff will use the information you provide in the application to analyze non-motorized crash count and rate analysis. Questions or results of that analysis will be shared via email or the point of contact for grant coordination. So the reason why we did it this way, and we got support through our working group that we had prior to opening the call, is that we were afraid if Harlingen did their analysis different than FAR, and FAR did their analysis different than, San Benito. And so by having the RGVMPO staff do it, we can ensure consistency in analysis in our method through all the projects, and we can turn over those results to you. And there'll be other instances that we do this, but I'll demonstrate that to you shortly. As far as proposed safety countermeasures, I did add a link here for what FHWA has, but I also recommend using the state highway. We have a safety plan. It's called the SHIP. I think it's State Highway Improvement. I'll have to find it. But there are other proven safety countermeasures. Just use FHWA or TxDOT materials. That's helpful. Maybe that's lighting. We have found in many ways that helps improve safety. Curb extensions, speed management, if you're going to incorporate the reduction of speed along a route that you're having a facility. These are ways to get points for safety, which again give you a total of 25 points. And when it comes to proposed infrastructure elements, if applicable, use that bikeway terminology section in the program guide for consistency. It is recommended that you expand on your response. So if you have cross sections or design concepts or other supplemental materials, attach that and label it as, Exhibit B safety, if you'd like. And that will help reviewers, when it comes time to evaluate, have that backup documentation ready for those scoring points. So let's say you do your own analysis on motorized crash, feel free to submit that. You would be doing above and beyond, but your backup documentation, your expansion on those responses can overall help you garner more points. In equity, we put in that language from the BIL on our requirements. When it comes to the project area, is it in high need area? This is yes or no options here. And if you don't know, if you're unsure, give us a ring, submit request for technical assistance, and we can assist with some of this. For 12C, this is your population impacted. You can see here, you, the applicant, do not have to submit a response. We can make that more clear, but we kind of put it in here. There isn't a space for you to answer anyway. But we will be doing the analysis for determining these average percentages, and we will be submitting those results to you as we submit them to our voting membership. For C3, the historically disadvantaged track, there's a map here that you can utilize to answer. The orange tracks are those historically disadvantaged, and you just say it's in a historically disadvantaged track or it's outside. And if you're unsure, get with us. And again, attaching backups as supplementals and labeling them will help. Connectivity. So this one is 30%, right? This is 30 points total that you can get. So again, because of that, we recommend you expand on your response, provide other details. I don't know why I put cross sections, but this is the one that you really want to put maps. So plan consistent, when it comes to plan consistency, it says provide documentation for regional and local plans. Here in the application, you're just going to check off those that apply. But in your backup, we're going to verify, oh, this definitely, you can list and link those plans and give us page numbers to go where in that plan you're implementing it. So I'm just, Brownsville has a 2013 bicycle and pedestrian master plan. Let's say what I'm proposing implements that plan, but it also implements a countywide plan. And it also tends to implement the RGVMPO's active transportation plan. Then I'm going to want to list those links and say, this chapter, this page in the Brownsville plan, this chapter, this page in the countywide, this chapter, this page in the region-wide, etc. Very simple. If it's connecting to existing multimodal transportation systems, we want to know how it intersects. We're looking for something that's within half a mile. Anything that's too far from a bus stop, I want to be really specific. This says transit stops, not transit routes. Your project could be really close to a route, but really far away from a stop. Being close to a route does not improve access to that route or to transit. It only improves access if it's close to a stop where someone can get on or off of that transit route. So be very careful when you're, submitting this. All of it will be reviewed and verified. But if you want help getting with a transit provider, because the MPO does have data on bus routes on our map, we don't have data on bus stops currently. We're working on it, but if you need help identifying where bus stops are, we can assist you by providing contact information to those transit agencies. Additionally, this is where I was talking about including visuals such as maps that highlight or color code related, public destinations that will help during the review and evaluation process. So when it says public building, I would put all my public buildings in blue and put it on a map, make it really easy. Schools, put all my schools in red, put all my parks in green, right? And anything else, if you want to do businesses or other stuff, put that in purple. But one map of your project highlighting what's in the surrounding area could go a long way. Multi-jurisdictional connections. If this project is one phase or a section of a larger project, we want you to include a narrative or maps to demonstrate the multi-jurisdictional connection or that length in miles. And that's because overall, right, we understand that your project might be a phase or a section, and it might just be 2 miles filling a gap or starting the vision of a larger plan. But let us know what that bigger plan is. Because if you do that, then we can give you more credit than if that information is left out and we're only looking at it for the small section you're ready to do now. And I do recommend that if you have a larger project that maybe is conflicted with railroads or utilities or right-of-way issues, and you're not ready for funding in those sections, I recommend you submit a proposal without those sections, right? Give us the big picture, but say this project would only take care of these areas and highlight why, this gap is going to be there. This has a railroad conflict, we're not ready. Or this one, we're waiting for another TxDOT project to make improvements here, etc. But you can submit project proposals in phases or in sections. Any questions on that, on part A? I knew I was going to be speaking for an hour and a half straight. We're at the hour mark, so. Ya mero. Okay. Part B, the project information form. Again, none of part B or C will hurt your project or your evaluation. This is basically just to help you, help TxDOT, help the MPO in facilitating advanced funding agreements and getting them going a little bit earlier. Hopefully, that's the goal. And it is a trial, but let me explain. So the project information form, you're not going to have a CSJ, so we already pre-filled that as pending funding award. Highway, we're just putting NA, unless it's adjacent to a non-system roadway, we're not going to fill that out. But project limits you want to incorporate, this should be from your page 1. The county, obviously, whatever you reside in, and if it's more than one county, feel free to put Hidalgo and Cameron. Functionally classified, that shouldn't apply. Your total estimate amount, please. Your letting date. At minimum, we need a fiscal year. If you're ambitious and you know what you're doing, you want to put a month and a fiscal year, go for it. But this fiscal year should be, I think, what did we say, Mel? 26 or 27, right? For letting? Más o menos, but we're just going to review it. Your scope of work, short and simple, what's going in your agreement and what fits in that box, right? From the page 1. Letting by, and it will always be you, your LG project sponsor. For some reason, I don't know if it's a FAR district thing or a statewide thing, but at least in the FAR district, all local governments let their own projects. That means the state won't do it, but they do facilitate that oversight for you to do it. Project manager, TxDOT will provide who the PM is, but we want to know who your PM will be and what their contact information is. Provide us with your DUN number, your address, etc. If there's an interlocal agreement required, like let's say we have a project right now with McAllen and Edinburgh, they have an ILA, say yes, that's executed, right? If Harlingen wants to work San Benito or Brownsville has a project with Los Fresnos, that interlocal likely is happening, and it's likely that the bigger city will be leading the project, but you'll want that ILA. And if there are ILAs involved, we want a name, and I'm just saying Los Fresnos, for example, would be Mark Milam, the city manager there, and so et cetera, et cetera. This is just more information, the better. And if you don't have it, again, it's not going to hurt you. We want to prepare you for what you're going to have to do. And so by providing this upfront, you have a clearer understanding of what's going to be expected of you moving forward. So the PIF, the Part B, has a budget section. This is exactly what it looks like, except it's blank, right? And so it's a little bit tricky. I heavily encourage you to submit a technical assistance request to review the budget, because this budget is really to identify the funding participation. How much of it will be local, how much of it will be federal. And in this budget, we don't look at the state's participation yet, right? That comes at the advanced funding agreement. But for this one, use your budget breakdown. It could be an itemized budget, but it is required. Please attach your own budget. This one is more of how much is coming from the federal government and how much is coming from the local government. So you can kind of see here, the category 9 funding request is 750,000. And of that 750, 80% is federal, 20% is local. And so these are all construction engineering, direct state costs. We're doing that split again, 80-20. These are reimbursable, yes or no, and then their total project cost. It can be tricky only because Melanie and I have been like practicing with like several projects doing this. I feel like we understand it, but it did take time for us to understand it. And so I want to be available to assist, and I want to help ensure that project sponsors know why we're doing it this way. And it's for state and federal reporting, plain and simple. So focus on your regular budget and then take this budget, and we can help break your budget down into these participation breakdowns, for example. So part C is that last section, and this is the SPA. Again, it's part of what TxDOT requires for AFA development, and we're just trying to smooth that transition. I want to be very clear, this is about 3 pages, pages 5 through 8. In the first page, you're going to do your proposed projects, all information related to that. Here's those funding sources. TxDOT, again, at this time is 0. This should más o menos be 80. This should be 20, but we can look at that. And then you're going to just put in some information here related to this project, right? Are you going to do it internally, or is it going to happen with a consultant? And that's for all of the above. And I think some of these allow you to do NA, but here you can describe your approach. So if it's, we're going to hire one consultant to do the environmental clearance and construction documents, or X, Y, and Z, right? That's what you want to kind of describe. If you're going to do it internally, City of McAllen's engineering team is going to be doing environmental clearance and right, utility relocation, but we will procure services for the development of a design and bid documents or something. And then the next 2 pages, those are all related to previous experience. And this helps TxDOT understand what type of support they're going to need to help you with, if applicable. And so you're not going to be required to submit any of your fiscal year audited financial statements. The MPO doesn't need that, but it is going to be asked of you by the state at the time of the development of an AFA. And again, just describe some work. This is more of a draft. We're not going to be super critical of this. We want you to get the practice. We want to better understand, but these sections are for the facilitation with the state and federal government more than they are for the competitive process. The last section here, right, two examples here, project A and project B, but here at the very bottom, we need to know who your responsible person in charge is going to be. And this person must be a full-time employee of the local government. They must be able to administer project activities, maintain familiarity with the day-to-day project operations, visit and review the project regularly, and review financial processes and documentation, and direct staff as needed. This person will probably be, if you're procuring consultant services, they will probably be administering all activities related to that. And so your project manager is another name of a person that you can identify. I think what's critical here is that it can be the same person as the RPIC. It doesn't have to be. It can also be a consultant, which is different than the other one, right? We had, excuse me, I don't know what I ate. I think it was the salsa with my taco earlier, but I'm burping, something's going on. But for the RPIC, it must be an employee. But for the PM, it can be a consultant. But again, they should know about day-to-day manners. It can also be the same person. A qualified person should have the LGP training prior to execution of the AFA. It can be the same person, and it can be a consultant. So just let us know. These are things we want you to consider. I know there's a lot of turnover. I know there's a lot of things going on in staff and all these things. But if you have an idea, or if you want to start getting an idea, that's kind of why we put in these sections in the application. Any questions related to the application itself? We are at the end. All right, hearing no questions, I'm just going to assume I'm doing a fabulous job, and everyone is fully understanding the whole process here. This section here about local government project procedures, it's not so much about our project call anymore. Once your project has been awarded, I want you to know what are the program requirements you will need to meet, what laws and regulations will need to be followed, what are some of the resources to help you through this process, right? I think our area, or in general before, I felt like there wasn't a lot of information on what is required of the project sponsors after they get awarded. And so hopefully we're giving you some more insight there. We just kind of went over, what an RPIC is and a project manager. They can all be the same person or they can be different, but we want to identify these people. This is the video. It's about 45 minutes long. It's applicable laws and regulation. TxDOT gave this for their workshop. I recommend using it. Oh, I didn't want to do that, but it goes over the program requirements. I'm like, yeah, you kind of want to dive into this. I recommend it, especially if you've never done a TASA project before. All right. So when we're talking about the RPIC and we're talking about qualified people, these qualified people should successfully complete the LGPP qualification course. And that's this LGP 101. And so Melanie helped link directly the web pages for getting training and qualification. I'm going to drop this in the chat right now because it takes months before you're actually enrolled in a class. And so just y'all are getting a head start on it. And this is where you can actually enroll and look at the courses, and they show availability, but you all check it out in your own time. There you go. But yes, we recommend having more than one qualified person on staff. So again, in case there's turnover, God forbid an accident happens or something, your one qualified person on the team is no longer there, and it's going to take you months to get into a course to have the certification that you need. Don't put yourself in that situation. If you know you want money from this call, you have a competitive project, even if you don't, and you want to get involved with other MPO funds, have multiple staff qualified or completing this course. That's just my biggest recommendation to the whole region any day on a regular basis. If you had it, they expire every 3 years. So maybe it's time to renew yours, and that's another thing to be careful with. But I won't preach on that no more. Resources. Let's talk resources. Again, getting federal funding is great. 80/20 is beautiful. Melanie and I will do everything we can to keep your local match contribution at 20% or lower. Trust us. We want to help you have this smooth project development and procedure, right? But we kind of went over this. Project initiation incorporates identifying the RPIC and qualified peoples. You do an initial project coordination, you get your AFA done, and there's non-construction stuff. So this is a project development and delivery checklist, and you can get this straight out of this frequently used forms and documents. And I'm not going to go over it, but I'm just going to pop them up. You can see this is 295 pages. This is the entire guide. This is the Bible of project management, right? And you can go through planning and programming, the agreements. This is for non-construction projects, preliminary engineering design, environmental compliance. Everything you need is in this manual. If it's too much, and I agree, it's too much, I ain't never read it. I just go straight to the section I need. Frequently used forms and documents is probably my favorite thing. And I have to applaud TxDOT for doing this. I don't know when they did it. I don't remember having this early on. But this gives you flow charts for anything you don't understand or you want to better understand. This is that delivery and development checklist that I was telling you about. You can download it, you can edit it. Anything from non-construction, get your review checklist together, save that. There's all kinds of stuff in here. And later in project development, I guide people often to the certification statements. You're going to need that towards like once you've already designed your project, you're getting ready for construction. But there's a lot in here. These are straight up just forms and documents. This isn't an explanation. This is just exactly what you need to do a checklist. So construction review. I think what I like, the other ones that I like is that's the review checklist. That's procurement checklist. I don't know. There was like a 30, 60, 90. I'm like blanking, but I recommend checking this out. And then, yeah, just giving it a look. It's basically like the cheat sheet of what to do for developing your project. And with that, this is my last slide. We have talked multiple times, submit your request for technical assistance. April 26th is the deadline. The reason why April 26th is the deadline is because that's the deadline to request technical assistance. But the deadline to submit applications is May 31st. So we're going to get our last request April 26th, so we can use April 26th through May 31st to facilitate and actually provide that assistance. The earlier your request comes in, the earlier we can coordinate and provide technical assistance. But if you're waiting for the request deadline, April 26th, and I'm sure some people will, I know I would if I was on the other end of this, that's okay. We're going to have a month at least to help provide that technical assistance, but you do not want to miss the April 26th deadline because if we're overworked, I mean, I'll try to squeeze anyone in if we have the capacity, but if we don't have the capacity, that's really what my fear is. And it's going to be first come, first serve. So here's that form. I applaud Melanie. Last week, we did not have this form up. We were talking about missing emails. God forbid. I know it does happen. Getting busy. And you can submit an email. We're still going to keep our eye out from that. This isn't like only submit on this form. But if you use this form, you'd be greatly helping us because what you can do here outside of also providing your name, your title, and your entity and all that is you can let us know when you're available to meet or an alternate time to meet. So you can give us two options and we can automatically send you a calendar invite for one of your preferred options. You can put in your request description, like would like to review budget in the PIF or questions about an analysis, right? Whatever you want to put, it doesn't matter. We're, a judgment-free place. We just want to provide assistance. That's our goal. You can attach things if you want us to review them. It's optional, but if you have your draft application ready and you want us to do an initial review for improvements or recommendations, send it in. We're going to do our best to give you the feedback, to give you a competitive process. Melanie and I will not be scoring. We will not be evaluating. We, with Craig, will be reviewing and sharing information to the voting members. And then it'll be on you to provide the materials through the application and attachments and your presentation to BPAC. Then the voting membership, they will vote, they will score. So us helping you isn't a conflict of interest. We're going to help everyone equally, do our best for everyone, and competitive, they're going to compete as they compete and be scored as they're scored. So outside of this, the presentation from last week is here. We're going to incorporate this one. It has minor revisions, and I'm going to probably recommend, we recommend you use this meeting's presentation. And then again, we're probably going to post this recording. It's at this point, it's almost an hour and a half. But we find that it might be helpful for others, or at least we're hearing other people who couldn't attend these workshops. We might just post it up. So any questions? That is the end of my TASA workshop. Let me get to the chat. Let's see. What was lapsing of funds mentioned? Yes, sir. Thank you, Melanie. Just to go over the lapsing of funds again, it does mean they can disappear, and you have about 3 to 4 years. So if we program in fiscal year 23, or is it, we would have to program, you want to obligate funds in 26 and 27. Yeah, because it's 23, we're in 23, 24, 25, 26 would be 3 years. So by fiscal year 2027 would be when the funds lapse. Any other questions? Did we do a good job? Okay, we can stop the recording so you all can feel more comfortable. Stopping the recording.